Welcome to Railway Conversations with Doc Frank, and I'm Cara Cohen.
Hello and welcome back to the show. My guest today is Cara Cohen from England. Her job title is Business Change Manager ETCS for Freightliner. That's a freight operating company in the UK. And she is also an organisational psychologist by background. In this episode, we talk about the aspects of change for the introduction of ETCS, how to bring an organization to adopt this new technology, how important it is or not to be a psychologist as a change manager, and much more. Please enjoy this episode, and if you know somebody, a colleague, a co-worker, a friend who may benefit from this as well, remember, sharing is caring. I thank you. Hi, this is Doc Frank again. I need to tell you about my brand new online ETCS training. It's the online version of the well-proven ETCS Kickstarter live training that has helped more than 200 railway professionals in Australia and New Zealand, regardless of their prior knowledge of signaling. So that really means you can learn the fundamentals of the European train control system, even if you didn't have any signaling knowledge before the training. How good is that? There's an online study group for networking during the training, and I also provide an industry-leading support of questions and answers, not just during your training, but also for a guaranteed minimum of 12 months after the training. Sign up now at docfranktraining.podia.com/ETCS. That's docfranktraining.podia.com/ETCS. Cara, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
So am I. I had a recent interview with a colleague of yours. And in fact, initially I wanted to have you on the show, and then the other person basically came in between, or you volunteered him in. And then we said, okay, we do one with you later on because you needed some time to prepare. You had some big announcements. I'm not sure whether you talk about this today. We will see. But
yes, I was going to say, I felt it was really important that my colleague Craig came onto your show first, as he has done amazing work in terms of our driver training, and it felt like a really good time for him to be able to share that information. While, as I said, we are continuously building more in the background in terms of business change. And today I am really excited that I'll be able to share at the end of the show one of our next endeavors that we're getting into.
Excellent. So that gives me just a leeway to the first question I have. So your job title is Business Change Manager. So what is a Business Change Manager? What does a Business Change Manager do? And why is it a good idea to have one when you're introducing ETCS, the European Train Control System? 3 questions in one.
Yes. So I feel that business change is something that is going to have to be adaptable depending on your program or on your project. And within the East Coast Digital Program and within where we're introducing European Train Control System, it is very much acting as that conduit between the process and the technology and the people that are being impacted. I spend a lot of time in meetings or working with technical experts to document what is the impact on Freightliner, what's the impact on the people, and what do I need to support and facilitate so that my colleagues within Freightliner have the capabilities to be able to operate on an ETCS railway and realize the benefits that we're trying to deliver. So we've spent a lot of time communicating the benefits of ETCS and what it can deliver for them. And now, and for a while now, it has been, okay, how do I ensure that you're capable so that you can deliver it, so that you can see this through? Because I can't deliver the benefits. ECDP can't deliver the benefits. It's us as the operators and as the railway people together who have to be ready so we can actually realize that safety element, capacity and, to actually improve our network together.
Yeah. So a change manager, and I employed a change manager before, and I think some people in the organization that I was working back then were looking at me a little bit cross-eyed why I came to that foreign idea to employ a change manager in my project team, because we never needed one in the past. I think that the thing is that's often underestimated when you introduce a new digital signaling technology, such as ETCS in your case, and it was CBTC in my case back then. It's a very, very fundamental change for the people dealing with it, especially the train drivers, because all of a sudden, often for the first time in their lives, they have a monitor in front of them, a cap display, where they may still have signals out there in the field, or maybe they don't, and they have additionally a display, and so you can basically see, or it's pretty understandable what the change is, that they get some additional input. They have to know whether they need to look at this or they need to look at that, and what to do if there are contradictions and so on. And this amount of change is for many railways, I think, almost unprecedented. And that's why it's also unprecedented often to bring a change manager in like yourself. Would you agree?
I agree 100%. And I think if we even go back to how East Coast Digital has been presented to the railway, to the public, is that it is a change program. It's not necessarily just an infrastructure program. It is the very change that we are trying to make within our railway community. We acknowledge that, I'm simplifying it, but introducing technology and adding these components to a locomotive and on the network, that is one thing that you can have a start and you can have a finish and you can really measure that. But the actual cultural change that you need to have in the process for people to be receptive to the technology when they've been operating, looking at signals for their entire careers, their entire lives. If you even look at the role of the signaler, the role of the controller, all of those are impacted by this new technology. It's new language and new considerations. So, of course, we need to ensure that we are supporting the drivers and signalers and controllers and anybody who works within the railway to adopt this new technology. Because the way I think of it is that right now we're still building up. We're still raising the awareness and that desire to want that change. At some point, we're going to reach that point where it goes, okay, this is the button. Now you need to now operate in this new way. And habitually, they're going to want to go back to what's comfortable. And I don't blame them. That you want to go with what you're comfortable with and what you've seen every day. So that business change manager role is so important so that we can ensure that we have prepared that support system so that these people feel that they are encouraged to go towards this new way of working, and that for a duration of time, we understand that they're going to be fighting almost, I think, what comes natural to go back to the way they've been working. But I think it's so crucial that within these types of programs that we have on the railway, others previously that I've observed, that having an individual who's looking at the people side is really important so that you don't leave them behind.
Yeah, because it has a very strong psychological component for sure. Because, people are normally used to change to an extent. Yeah. So I could imagine a train driver just gets to hear, okay, well, they're doing this fancy new thing, which is called ETCS. And it's just another innovation in the signaling field. I've seen some changes in signaling before. In the UK, a few years back, TPWS, that was new. Okay, we got to deal with that. So how much worse can it be? And then they realize what it is about. And suddenly they say, oh, wait a minute. Well, this is a much bigger change than the previous ones. And they may not 100% like it. They may ask questions like, why do we need that? Can we do without it? What if I don't like it? Can I just switch it off? And all this kind of stuff. And once this resistance is building, if somebody has a basic idea, I don't like this, I don't want this. And then guess what? They will find difficulties to deal with it. which basically supports their prejudice and saying, see, I knew that's not a good technology. I don't want this. I want it even less than I wanted it not yesterday. So, before you know it, you are really in a negative spiral, and people completely reject it. And I've seen it before that users of a new system actually switched it off just to get rid of it, just to say, well, let me deal with the old way, and that's fine. But with ETCS, that's not going to work.
So I think what that picture you painted is that worst case scenario. And I'm quite confident in that we've had conversations with drivers. They've been involved throughout this introduction that we've had so far. We spent a lot of time engaging with ASLEF and bringing them along the journey as well. And so far, the reception has been more so on a positive side. People understand why we have to do it. They understand the benefits. They understand that this is happening to the entire UK. They have fed back so far through Freightliner that they are confident that we will be able to deliver this in a way and they will be supported. So the mindset right now is very positive. But you are right. When we get into that overlay where the individual is driving that locomotive in level 2 and something inevitably at some point goes wrong, they're going to want to just switch it off. So it's us ensuring that we have created every avenue to make it easier for them to call somebody, ask for help, or to give them written resources they have with them that they want to fight through and they want to get through that uncomfortable feeling, correct whatever potentially has gone wrong, get that support and continue onwards. That is where it's going to be our job to make it easier to progress forwards than to try and step back. Luckily, we have, perhaps you've already seen on the news that GTR is already operating on the Northern City Line. And so we have a lot of colleagues there who are collecting data as they have been going through and training their staff and having them operate in an overlay. And we're learning from all of what's happening on that line, on the Northern City Line. And so we're already implementing that into Freightliner. And we're very lucky that they've gone first and that they are such a very well put together team and that they're collecting everything. So some of those things that you've mentioned, they are experiencing in small bubbles. But I think because of the fact that we are acknowledging it when it's small before it gets quite big, we're able to intervene quite early on. And overall, it is a positive mindset, and that most drivers who are now interacting with the ETCS and learning about level 2 are actually quite excited for it because they can see the benefit. It does protect them. It does give them a better driving experience. And most then see that. And so, yeah, I definitely think that within the UK, we have scope that we can make it a positive experience.
You mentioned a couple of things which I think are very worthwhile emphasizing. And one of the things was that you said it's important that the drivers or generally the users of the new system feel supported. So they are not left on their own to figure things out no matter what happens. But this already is to an extent the role of you as a change manager or the people responsible for business change to create an environment like a culture where people feel supported through this change. So that's one thing. And the other thing you mentioned is to recognize early or identify early if there are any apprehensions or so. So even people that have generally a positive mindset and they understand the reason why, they understand it's going to happen, whether I want it or not. And they are generally, adoptive. So that they want to do the change. They still may feel insecure about it. Because they don't know what's coming. They don't know how it will be, how much different it will be. Who knows what they have picked up? They may have seen something on the internet, like some train driver from somewhere else, maybe a different country or so, having had a terrible experience with an introduction of ETCS that maybe was done more poorly than you do it in the UK. So they may have heard things that you can't really control, which gives them some feeling of insecurity. Yeah, I want it, but oh my God, that is so difficult. And I'm already 59 and maybe who knows whether I can do it. And this new technology and everything is digital and so on. So identifying this early and then basically adjust to the individual needs of the people. Is it a problem with new IT technology? Is it a problem with pressing the right buttons? Is it the problem with whatever the problem is that they may have heard something elsewhere, which is a myth, which is just about needs to be busted. But first of all, you need to communicate with them and you need to find out what is the problem that they're having, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so listening to that, I'm thinking about the approach that we have taken. Just over 12 months ago, we started introducing our drivers to ETCS through a one-day foundation workshop. And so they've just received the pure basic. It's not competency-based. It is a learning experience. It's very interactive. And it introduces the drivers to the driver-machine interface and that start of mission process, which might be one of the more daunting aspects of ETCS for many people if they have to operate in like level NTC. Now, from that course, we have been collecting feedback every single time and trying to use that feedback to enhance the course. So far, it has been largely positive because we have an amazing group of trainers and operational specialists who, when the driver sits there and goes, yes, but how does the system understand this? And how does it do that? Because most of the apprehension is from the system. How do I trust the system? But once they realize that they're still in control and the system is an advisory and it's to support them, then they do feel, oh, okay, I'm still in control of this locomotive. I still get to make the decisions. You're still dependent upon my knowledge and my expertise. So then they feel secure in their role. Now, from that foundation, we've had feedback where people have said that they are 59, they're over based in the Northwest. Likelihood is they might not actually interact with level 2, ETCS level 2. And they actually feel a bit annoyed because they now wish they could have the opportunity to experience it. So quite often we're getting a bit more of that. Now, after everyone's gone through foundation, we've maintained that engagement by including updates within the program on safety briefs that drivers attend, and spent a lot of time doing bite-sized learnings. So we're mindful that we don't want to fatigue individuals with this change. We don't want to bombard them with too much information. So instead, doing twice a month, very simple one-pagers that go straight to their iPads, just giving them a snapshot of something that's taking place. And that has been so useful for myth busting. Anytime that one of our trainers hears a myth during a foundation or while they're at a depot, they feed the information back to me so we can put together a one-pager addressing whatever that myth was that they might have heard. Or we're using really frequently asked questions from the training taking place and just doing a really nice one page with images and everything so that we can try and pique the interest of every driver to at least want to take a quick glance at it. And this has also become an amazing way for me to give those updates on the East Coast Digital Program and highlight the amazing work that's going on within the industry. So hopefully they'll be able to realize that this isn't that long grass that we originally thought, that this is coming and it is reality. And then as well, it is almost applying that pressure that if there are concerns, you let us know. If you have a question, you let us know. And also to support that, we have our team that is based around the sites that are going to be impacted by level 2 And then we have our engineering specialists, and those are located at all the different vehicle maintenance facilities. So we try to ensure we also have a physical presence around the business and that we are blending in with the rest of the company. We don't want them to view us as being outsiders. Many of us have moved on to the ERTMS program from within the business, in fact.
You mentioned one acronym which I think deserves explaining. That was level NTC. Do you want to explain it, or you want me to do that?
I'm happy to give it a try.
Yeah, all right, go for it.
Level NTC, level National Train Control, that is going to be the operation of an ETCS fitted locomotive. However, it is operating on conventional signaling. Now, most of the Freightliner drivers will only require level NTC training due to the fact that ETCS level 2 is being introduced simply on the East Coast Mainline South at this moment. And so that is the training course that most of our drivers will stop at. And as is required, they will then receive that level 2 training, in respect to if they move depot or as ETCS continues to spread around the country.
So level NTC, you explained it quite well. So what's happening is that the ETCS onboard computer that sits on the train is basically working around the clock. All the time the locomotive's working, the ETCS onboard computer is active. But if the locomotive is not in an ETCS area, but in an area where the National Train Control System, which in your case is TPWS, is deployed, the onboard computer basically picks up the input from the trackside legacy system, TPWS, and then displays the information on the driver-machine interface for the. So it's still a change for the train driver because the interface itself changes. It changes from the previous relatively simple TPWS interface to the more complex driver-machine interface, which is a computer monitor of ETCS, right?
Yes. Now, when a driver is operating on National Train Control, I think the key differences that they're going to experience are going to be how they log into the systems. They still have to do a start of mission, logging into the locomotive. Now, right now, they do that twice on 2 different systems. This actually is just combining that into one singular movement, which hopefully people will see the benefit of later on. In addition, when it's not operating, when the locomotive is not operating on a level 2 network, it will show up as a speedometer. So there's just a few things have been moved around inside the cab. The drivers will have to learn about those components and what can happen and what kind of fault finding. But a majority of that change is that new login and that new process to log into the locomotive itself.
It sounds easy enough, but as you already hinted, the devil's in the detail. So as long as everything works as expected, that's fine. So you explain login, you need to type in your locomotive number and your driver ID, and so how hard can it be? So, but if this is basically all they have learned in their training, they've done that, and then something behaves differently from what they expected, maybe because of a malfunction, maybe because of a situation they just haven't covered in a previous training or so, that's where the problem starts, right?
Yes. And I think that's the reality of train driving, full stop, is that operating a train when everything is fine is great and dandy. What we have to train our drivers for is those out of course events. And that is where a majority of that focus for that level NTC training will take place. In addition, we are treating our fitted locomotives as if it's new traction. So the drivers and the training that they receive, it very much is as if they're learning a brand new class of locomotive.
Yes. And so I was just going to ask to what extent you think the change caused by ETCS is bigger or more than previous changes. But you just basically came up with the example training a driver on a new locomotive, which may be just as much of a change. Yeah, I mean, if I remember the sometimes quite old classes of locomotives that you still operate in the UK, like a class 37 or something like that. And then suddenly you've got something brand new that it's maybe, I don't know, a hybrid locomotive, maybe even with some hydrogen or battery operated or what have you. And all of a sudden you've got all these blinking lights and displays and what have you. So I could imagine that this change or this kind of change is also quite significant. Does it make that easier for ETCS that you say, okay, well, it is a change for the drivers, but it's like manageable. So we are, I mean, you are obviously optimistic. Anybody who hasn't heard it by now really, well, slept through the episode so far, but you are optimistic that this kind of change is manageable, that you will bring your drivers along on the journey and everybody else who needs to learn about that. But do you still find that change more difficult than previous ones for the business, or do you think it just as long as it's managed properly, everything's fine?
I think so. Prior to working in business change, I spent a bit of time in human resources, and so that's within a rail environment, and so I've supported individuals dealing with changes in their personal lives, changes in their work lives, through COVID. And I think perhaps it might even have been the experience of how the drivers had to adapt during COVID to keep that business moving forward that makes me so optimistic that a positive change like this is something that we are able to adopt. We, and I say the rail community, are such a resilient bunch that we've had to just continue. We've had to keep going throughout an entire pandemic. And if we were able to do that and really try and keep a positive morale, then I think that's where my optimism comes from, that with the correct support, we can make this just another change and we can actually create benefit from it. And we can actually take this as an opportunity and an investment in freight to support modal shift, to get better pathways on the network. And perhaps even attract a new type of people within to freight because of the promise of this new technology and new things they can really get into and become specialists at.
I think it's important. It's really essential from the train driver's perspective, or from anybody in the railway organization who needs to undergo such a change, that they feel there's somebody there who wants to help them, who wants to support them, who is on their side. And even if not everything is done perfectly, it's an exchange. So they can give feedback. They can say, hey, thanks for the training. I still haven't understood a certain aspect of that. But then you say, okay, well, maybe I need to slightly change my communication for this person, or maybe generally I have to improve my training course. So you basically work with them until you sort this out. So when we had our pre-talk before we started this episode, you said something like, somebody could think we are doing something wrong here, or we're doing something not perfect. And I responded that the only mistake you can do with regards to change management is not doing it at all. Right? So if you leave people alone, if you just say, well, yeah, we're introducing this new system and here is a 20-page manual, you read this at home and then you go for it. Then they feel left alone. Then they feel left like hanging out to dry and so on. And this is literally the only real mistake that I can imagine people doing in change management. Yeah, to not realize that different people may react differently to that challenge of change, and not emphasize with them and help them getting along, right?
And I think as well with that, it's that we all want to be in control over our environment, and we want to feel as if we have a say so. And leaving individuals on their own and saying, this is what's going to happen, here's the manual, read it. They don't feel they have a say so. They don't feel that they have control. They feel like this is happening to them. And so it is having that mindset of, this is happening, we're doing this with you. We're not just going to impose this on you. You join the workshops, you join the discussions, you are involved. You tell me how much maybe, I've been working with a lot of the heads of departments on the development of our training for the operational office staff. And it's saying, how much time do you want your teams to be spending on this training? Here's the minimum, but we don't want to do the minimum. We want to ensure that they feel appreciated, engaged, that they understand that we value their time to ask questions, but also for them to gain an appreciation of what's happening to everybody, not just them. So we don't want to have those silos of knowledge. We want our roster clerks to understand what change the drivers are going through, the train planners are going through. We want them to be able to communicate with each other and have a bit of perhaps it's a bit of empathy for one another, that we're all in it together. So I think, leaving people on their own, that's just the worst thing you can do.
Yeah.
The more you can have them involved, the more you can make it collaborative, then you're not imposing change, which is the last thing anybody wants.
Yeah. And if there are options that can be influenced by the users, by the drivers, that their ideas are basically taken on board to the extent possible. I mean, if somebody said, I want a completely different user interface for ETCS, I say, well, sorry, that's not going to happen. Yeah. But if somebody said, shouldn't we have a better explanation of the symbols on the display or something? Sure. That's something that can be taken on board. And this is something where they also see, hey, I had an idea. People are listening to me. I can influence change. I can influence improvements to make it easier for myself and for my driver colleagues to basically introduce that change. That's very, very important, I think.
Exactly. And that's where it's worth noting that every time we had a human factors specialist come into Freightliner to look at how we retrofit our locomotives, we had ASLEF representation there to feed in their thoughts and opinions about those placements. So ASLEF has been actively involved from the start through all different aspects of this process. And so, again, we've been taking them along with us. They've had a say so. We're not just going to go and fit the cab, bring a driver in and he goes, actually, I can't see that, or that's in the way. This is how I prefer to move the arm. We've had multiple individuals involved to ensure that it's for the actual end user, and that end user has been the focus since the start.
The buy-in also gets much, much better if they basically have a say in that. I had a funny story a few years back. I was in the curious situation to design a completely new signaling system from scratch, a simplified conventional signaling system, which I thought should be very different from the existing signaling. So instead of like a green aspect indicating the train drivers to proceed, I wanted to introduce a white aspect. And the main difference was, or the main reason was, to create a difference between that new type of signal and the old type of signal that was clearly evident. So it's not green, it's white. So it must be one of those new signals. So we workshopped this with the drivers, and inevitably they came up with the question, why do you make this light white? So I explained why, and they understood this, and they said, you know what? Proceed is green. Just make the light green and not white. I said, fine. If you want that, we make it green. And they looked at me, what do you mean we make it green? I said, well, these lights are for you guys. If you say they're going to be green, they're going to be green. End of story. And the buy-in after that was so great. Like a signaling guy listening to them, changing the design, changing fundamental aspects of the design based on their influence. I went back to the signaling guys later on and came up with this idea for new signaling. And they said, you know what? If you make this light green, then drivers may confuse it with the old system. And I said, you know what? The drivers asked me to make this green. Yeah. And that's what they want. Yeah. Oh, I can't believe this. Yeah. I said, well, go and talk to the drivers yourself. You will see. So they were so supportive after that. Unfortunately, that system came never into practice, but it was a very, very nice experience, which basically showed to me this increase of buy-in by the users if you really take their suggestions on board and really run with it. Not just say, that's a nice idea, but we're not doing it. But saying, well, that's a good idea and you are the users. So to the extent possible, we accommodate this, right?
Yeah. And moment of thought. No, I was going to just say that so far we've been really lucky in that we have a number of these quick wins. We've had a number of small decisions that aren't, we've had a number of these small decisions where we've been able just to have the individuals shape what they want and what they want everything to look like. But your example, it's a perfect, trying to get my train of thought on that. I think it was just such a perfect example of the culture that we're creating within the ERTMS project here in the UK. And that's how it is. And I say that not just within Freightliner, but within the program itself, is having that end user and a user design led approach.
One of the reasons why I was so keen to get you on the show when I saw your job title, Business Change Manager, specifically related to the introduction of ETCS, is that I see in the industry that this whole topic of business change, or some call it business transformation, that's a real big obstacle that is really doing some people's head in other railway organizations. Yeah. So most railways by now have understood, maybe by talking to other railways, lessons learned, something like that the introduction of a new digital signaling technology is not business as usual. And it's not just about the new technology, but just as much about process and people. But that people element, this transformation, this change element really seems to be the most difficult bit for most organizations. So from your perspective and from everything you said, it seems to go very smoothly for Freightliner. So fingers crossed that it stays like this. What would be some tips that you could give to other railway organizations with similar struggles introducing ETCS and, oh my God, how do I bring the whole organization along? Because in many cases, it's not just the train drivers. It's the train controllers. In your case, you are a freight operator. So for you, it's predominantly the train drivers. For a more integrated rail operation, it could also affect the people looking after the network, the infrastructure. It could include the train controllers. It could include, I don't know, the people dealing with in HR with the work contracts because of different job requirements all of a sudden. So the change often affects very, very wide parts of the organization. What tips could you give for other organizations to hopefully make it a bit smoother as well?
Yes. Well, I was thinking about some of the roles that you named, and those are impacted within Freightliner. Haven't gotten into the nitty gritty, but within Freightliner, we do have terminal operations as well. We maintain our own fleet. So the impact is the entire business to an extent. So we are working with all parts, but the train driver is always the most interesting group to discuss. In terms of what tips, personally, it has been that collaborative working. It has been that instead of just making decisions, it's getting a group of people in the room talking through. Because interestingly enough, it is the end user who will tell you exactly what it is they want and how they want it. We run various surveys for our drivers, receiving feedback on their thoughts of the change and just keeping that measurement going. And it was a few drivers commenting back on the last survey saying they wanted more small pieces of communication that initiated the bite-sized learnings. And then it was a follow-up meeting with a colleague on the program who showed me some bite-sized learnings that she was putting together that went, light bulb, I know exactly what I need to do now. So I would say don't work in a silo. Get as much resource as you can and consult with everybody and look to see, as you pointed out, where the lessons have already been learned and what you can bring into your organization. I point out that I'm privileged to be on the East Coast Digital Program, and that we have business change managers within every freight operator, and that we regularly meet up, talk about the current events and what we are working with within our individual organizations. We put down any level of competition with one another and speak very candidly about how we can support each other to continue driving this forward.
That's very interesting. So you basically have a working group of change managers where you exchange best practice ideas, how to do it better. That's a nice segue to my next question. If I wanted to become a change manager, or if that sounds too bombastic, if I was to be involved in a change management program of a railway organization, how would I do that? What would I have to do? What would I have to learn? Is a good intent enough, or would I have to go back to school or university for 3 years? So what can be done there? How do you become a change manager in the first place?
I have the route that I took. So I did a master's in organizational psychology at City University in London. Amazing. It was an amazing program. It's very much more applied rather than methodology. And I found that to be a great way of getting into business change. Getting into the railway, on the other hand, from my experience, was coincidence. Or it just happened, which I think a lot of people I talk to who join the railway, they kind of just stumble into it, they get stuck, and they realize they're not going to leave. So that for me has been just quite lucky. But for individuals within the UK who are interested in getting into business change, there's a lot of amazing apprenticeships, graduate programs, and qualifications you can get if going back to university is not your desired option. And I highly recommend that, as I do have colleagues within the program who have gone down that route instead of a university education. And I'm a huge advocate for apprenticeships, partially because the railway is a fantastic place to work if you want to go and do an apprenticeship. So shout out to all of those opportunities. I really encourage people to look at the railway for those reasons. But going back to your original question, for me, it has been going to university, and for me, it has just being persistent with knowing what I wanted to get to at that final step. I mentioned before, I've been in Freightliner for 6 years, and I did 4 years of that doing human resources and building up that knowledge of the organization. So the minute that business change was finally brought into the company, immediately applied and said, this is exactly what I've been studying for. This is what I've been working towards this entire time.
Yeah. So many think, and I think that's one of the prejudices that change managers need to struggle with, need to fight against, is that they are psychologists or shrinks, if you want to put it in a more insulting way. The change manager that I employed over here in Australia was a psychologist by trade. You are a psychologist by trade. I'm just curious if you are in that working group with the other change managers from the other companies, from the other freight operating companies. Do they all have a psychological background, or do they come from different disciplines? In other words, is every change manager a secret psychologist or not?
No, that's a really good question, and something that's a really great question. A number of the individuals who work within business change within ECDP have railway backgrounds and railway related degrees. Some of them have come from signaling. There's other individuals who have more of a business administration background or something that is related to management. And then again, they've gotten into business change as a result. So there are so many pathways that you can use depending on what your preferred perspective is. And I think that is another advantage of us coming together, is that people are coming with a different mindset. So as you've pointed out, I'm thinking about human behavior throughout my meetings. I have somebody else who's thinking more about a managerial approach. I have an individual who has really been there on the front line within the railway doing signaling and being a on-call responder for the railway and has all those experiences, and we're all coming together. And because we're having these different perspectives, I feel that we're able to cover a lot more, and we're able to really think about all those end users that we're impacting and ensure that all of them are represented. So I think it's great to have a diverse business change group.
What I identified a while back is that I look a lot about projects going on all over the world and to what extent they are successful or unsuccessful and why that may be. And very often you can pinpoint things on, they made a mistake during the planning phase, or they mistook the procurement, wrong packaging of contracts or something like that, or they just didn't do proper due diligence on suppliers, picked the wrong company to do the work for them. But what I found is that sometimes you have projects that seem to be well planned and that also seem to be well executed in an organized way, and they still are not as successful as they could be. And in my experience, that really comes down to cultural difficulties, to sticking to an old mindset. And I have actually developed a training program which is about the high capacity railway mindset. So I basically created these two scenarios: an old, which I call legacy mindset, so where people come out of a classical legacy signaling environment with respective mindset, and then on the other hand the high capacity mindset of a new railway after the transformation. Which transforms really into a higher capacity operation where a lot of things have to change, not just the technology of the signaling system. The problem that I found with that is the moment you say, we need to talk about your mindset, many people think, somebody wants to screw with my head. My mindset has been fine for the last 25 years of my career. Thank you very much. Yeah. So they basically want to be left alone, wide alone, the moment they have an indication, somebody is fiddling with my brains. And this person is a psychologist, which is even worse. So do you see this as a problem? And if so, how do you overcome that? How do people realize that they really may have to supplement their mindset? I basically say you don't have to throw away the old stuff, which served you your entire career. Quite the contrary. It's like a toolbox. Yeah, you've got your hammer and your screwdriver, and just because you buy a power drill, you don't throw away the hammer and the screwdriver. You just take the power drill as an additional tool that helps you to not just hammer nails and screw screws, but also to drill holes in the wall. So how do you see this conundrum or this potential resistance of people, not just against the change, but the people who wants to help them changing, if you know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. And I was kind of smiling to myself while you were talking about that, because that is a subject that is being discussed right now within the program. And so we have an event coming up in a few weeks where one of the workshops I'm supporting on is creating a pioneering mindset. And so using those words of that, as you pointed out, that legacy thinking, we've been within the rail network, we have been trained to think a particular way, which makes sense because it is regarding safety. It's regarding how you follow processes and rules. And I think there's a lot of history that's built into that. And now we need to start thinking in a more modern digital way, which isn't necessarily going to link up with some of these rules and regulations that have been in place. And it is, how do we go to our gatekeepers and how do we bring them along so that we can continue making progress? Because I think that is probably one of the challenges we have within the program, is continuing the progress forward with the individuals who, for a good reason, are there as a gatekeeper. But yeah, how do we continue that pioneering approach that we're trying to take? And to be honest, I think what we're trying to get out of that workshop is for people to realize that you just have to look at those kind of values of being caring and inclusive, and going back to what we've discussed of not trying to impose the change, but rather trying to include. But I don't know if there's a 100% correct answer, but that is the approach that we are trying to take now to continue making progress as we come up against barriers.
Have you ever encountered resistance from an individual simply by means of the fact that you are a psychologist, and that people were suspecting you would basically twiddle with their minds in some kind of secretive form without them even noticing, maybe?
No, to be honest, I think because I do not appear or carry around a psychologist type of presence, or I don't think I do, I haven't had individuals react to me in that sense. More so within my career, because of being foreigner in the UK, the resistance has been towards me as an outsider. So it's that obvious point of, oh, you're not English. I don't know if I trust you. I don't know if you know what you're talking about. And in those instances, or after some time now, has just been being persistent and just working on building relationships. And that's for me has been more of a challenge rather than a psychologist. But again, I think that many of us psychologists do not walk around just demonstrating or perhaps wearing the badge of I am a psychologist.
Yeah, but it's more like if people find out that you are a psychologist, then there's maybe some kind of apprehension, like who knows that she's doing stuff with your brains. That anyway, maybe I'm seeing ghosts there. Since you mentioned yourself, I didn't know whether I should mention this at all, but since you mentioned yourself that you're not British. A few years back, there seems to have been quite a big shift in your career, in your CV. You moved from the United States to the UK, and your career changed from what was previously like store assistants and jobs like this to studying organizational psychology in London. Why did you do that? Or what's your, and I don't just mean the move from the US to the UK, that may be purely private and it's none of my business, that's fine. But what made you do this career change and go into organizational psychology of all things?
Yeah, so the entire time in the US, I've been studying. In the US, studying is quite expensive, so it had to be kind of drawn out over a longer duration of time. However, by the time I came to the UK, I had a bachelor's degree in psychology. Oh. And from there, it was the decision of where do I want to specialize? And I think that from looking at my LinkedIn or from looking at my CVs, people would see that I had to start working at quite a young age. And so spending so much of my time working and observing behaviors in the workplace, I became quite amused around how people are motivated or why managers behave certain ways. And so that was kind of that built up over time, and that catalyst that I wanted to go and study that as my profession. And I just thought that was quite amazing. And I think as well, actually, it was even more that I did do a semester studying abroad in South Korea. And South Korea has a very different work-life balance. They have a very different approach to work. The culture is the polar opposite of the US in many ways. So again, it was looking at the different cultures and the ways that we think about work and we think about our careers and how our identity is linked to our career, made it even more interesting that I thought, oh, I'd like to go and study this. I'd like to do this for a living. And while going back to Asia and doing that master's degree in Asia was the first option of what I very much wanted, there wasn't very many programs available And that is when I found out around the programs that they do have in London and City University, and made the decision that I would pursue that. And then I think it was coming over here. I realized that I very much liked it, and I wanted to build my career and my life over here in the UK.
It definitely sounds very authentic. It sounds like you found your area of specialty, or your superpower, if you will. So all I can say is to wish you all the best for your further work with Freightliner. I think the UK is way to go with regards to ETCS, but everybody seems to be extremely optimistic regarding what's currently happening on the East Coast digital program, that it could really be a blueprint for the wider rollout of ETCS in the UK, which previously wasn't the fastest. But that's not just a UK thing. That's probably applicable for many other European countries as well. Thank you very much for your time. I hope that a lot of people took a lot of interesting things out of this. And if it could have helped some railway person elsewhere to help them with their change process and setting this on the right track, that would, I think, be a big win for both of us. So thanks again.
Yes, absolutely. And I think if anyone does listen to this and they are, as you point out, in a role of introducing change within their organizations, that they should feel free to reach out to East Coast Digital Program and members of the program, because one of our phrases is leaving a lasting legacy. And part of that is being able to share the lessons that we're learning and share best practice with not just within the program, but also outside the program. As well, I want to do a quick plug of my own. So anyone who's listening and is interested, one of my next endeavors within Freightliner is covering the communications regarding the fitment of our first-in-class locomotive. The decision was made in this spring 2024 to take that entire fitment process in-house, which is very exciting for us to build that capability within our company of individuals becoming experts with the technology as they're doing that fitment. And I'm very excited that this is going to enable me to cover the entire journey from a communications perspective and share it within Freightliner and within the industry. And with that, also follow the journey of those individuals who are learning how to fit a locomotive with ETCS.
I was, as you can probably tell, I was about to wrap this up, but now you opened up a new can of worms, so I need to stay there for like 30 seconds or so. If a non-ETCS party takes on board the installation, that normally requires a close collaboration with the supplier of the equipment. So, yes. So how exactly does that work? If you can say who the equipment supplier is, then feel free to do so. And how do you see this collaboration working to make sure that you get all the information necessary from the equipment supplier, and they at the same time will have to make sure that you are doing everything correctly, so that at the end of the day you've got a fully functioning system that can be written into service? How does that work?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are working in partnership with Siemens on the fitment of the locomotive. And remember, we have been working with Siemens for years now on the entire design process to fit our Class 66V. Now, this is just an extension of that into the actual fitment. If anything, Siemens has been a huge advocate for us doing the fitment in-house, and we're excited by the fact that it will be taking place at our Leeds vehicle maintenance facility, where we have dedicated individuals from the business who are going to do the fitment. We have members of the ERTMS engineering team who are there to provide that support. And we have those various project managers from Siemens who are going to also be there supporting everyone. So it's not just going to be Freightliner doing the fitment and then sending this for testing. It is going to be everyone together involved and seeing this through. And I think I'm very optimistic that we have a amazing team, both within the ERTMS function and our business as usual. And this is just a great way, I think, to build that relationship further and create more experts and super users and change champions just quite naturally as they fit this locomotive.
It's a very important interface for sure. I mean, a big criticism of ETCS is the cost and also the time to get things installed, especially the onboard installation and especially the first-in-class onboard installation. So maybe coming up with some kind of best practice, how to do this properly and how to do this in the minimum possible time, because that means the faster you can do it, the shorter your locomotive will be out of service. Yeah, which the operations guys will like a lot. So that's really paramount, and also helping to drive the cost down is quite significant. Yeah, I mean, people often focus on the equipment cost of the ETCS onboard equipment, but not realizing that the actual one of the biggest cost driver is in fact the installation. Yeah, and the one-off cost for a first of class, which may be very, very significant. And even after the first of class is done, what you often realize is that, yes, that's another locomotive of the same class, but looking at the detail, it's not 100% identical. Yeah, so instead of a first in class and then a rollout, it very often happens to have a first in class, a second first in class, a third first in class, and so on, right?
Yes. And so I'm again, you've painted my optimism really well, that because we have the individuals who've been maintaining these vehicles for their careers, doing that fitment, who knows them better? The individuals have been doing all that maintenance. Who actually knows the vehicle better than those individuals? And who would be better to give the locomotive that glow up? That it's I think it is just so well rewarded for this team that they get to be the ones to do that first in class, and maintain it going forward.
Great stuff. I'm hearing a lot of positive things regarding this ETCS introduction in the UK recently, which you could say it's about time, but on the other hand, looking forward, it's really, really encouraging. So again, all the best. And this time I really do wrap it up. So thanks again for your time and all the best for your further work at Freightliner and in the wider UK rail industry.
Thank you. I'm very excited for what's to come and for the rest of 2024 onwards.
Thanks, Cara. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Excellent. Hi, this is Doc Frank from the studio. I want to inform you about my latest and greatest training development, and it is all about the mindset of a high-capacity railway organization. What I found in my experience of training and consulting is that often you have projects for new technology which seem to be perfectly planned, which are very well executed, and they still don't lead to the success that was expected. And very often the reason for that is mindset. Key stakeholders that have what I call a legacy mindset, an outdated old ways of thinking where the new technology is treated in the same way as the old one, but it's just not suitable to get the most out of the new technology. What I'm offering in this training course, which is called High Capacity Railway Mindset, is that every month there's a new training module with 5 examples of an outdated legacy mindset, the suggestion of a new mindset more suitable for a high capacity railway, and how to get from the old to the new mindset. So those modules will be repeated every month for an entire year. So in total, we are talking about 60 different examples how to get from an old mindset to a more suitable new mindset. And the cost for this is only $10 per example. So this can be paid monthly, this can be paid for a year. And then you have the usual service of an alumni community afterwards where you can ask ongoing questions for at least 12 months after the training. You find more information and you can sign up on my training portal docfranktraining.podia.com/mindset. I hope I see you at this training. It's really leading edge stuff. Nobody else in the world is training on this. And if you really want to explore the ultimate frontier of success in technology projects, then this is the training you need to take. Hi, it's Dr. Frank again. I hope you liked today's episode. I like to keep it as simple as possible, so I only have one single request for you. If you like this podcast, please tell your friends and colleagues about it. That's all I want, because that's a service that I'm providing to the industry, and I would like as many people as possible to listen to this podcast and learn something from it. So please share, and until next time, keep it simple and bye for now. Thank you for listening.